Hello, everybody. This is Frank Norris of the Frank and Stan Chat. And as you can see, I'm joined today by my very good friend, Stan Johnson. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah.
Good
morning.
It is morning, isn't it?
For a while.
Yeah, because last week we were filming it because we had Tom Trower, who actually has a day job, which is sort of like teaching.
Yeah.
So we had to do that at about 4 o'clock, whereas this one is Stan and me. The time's just 5 to 10 on a Friday morning. So we have it's you and me. We've had quite a few guests recently, so this is the first thing where it's just you and me.
Yeah. So switch off now. Is that what you're saying?
I have to say, anybody watching, we've just been chatting for about half an hour before we started videoing. So whether we've got anything left to say is another thing. Hopefully we'll be a little bit more measured because we've thought about some of the points we're going to make. But again, tumultuous week. It's been just can't believe what's going on at the moment. So what we've had this week is more children, more students having to be self-isolating, more children being identified as being positive with COVID, more classes going home, pupils being sent home, classes going home. And we also have test and trace falling apart, really, with just not able to cope with the number of people wanting to be tested. And all of this is going to have a negative impact, I think, on schools, both in the short term and the medium term. So quite a lot to talk about. We've also got the issues around the government breaking the law, willing to break international treaty, and I think we might get, well, I certainly want to talk about that. We've also got the COVID-19 Ofsted visits which are coming through. So anyway.
And I understand, Frank, that HSE are doing contacting schools as well.
I know.
Not helpful.
I hope that's all coordinated, Stan.
Yeah. What do you think?
What are you doing here? Oh, what are you doing here? Anyway, okay. So the ground rules are, we try and be kind and fair, and we don't try and slag anybody off. Although it's increasingly difficult to stick to that. But anyway, what's caught your eye this week, Stan?
Well, I don't know if you saw this one, Frank. There's it's gone quite viral, I think. A letter from a head teacher to parents about why 3 or 4 of his staff have got COVID, and the fact that it was down to a social event that he then basically, if you read people's comments, he threw his staff under the bus, saying that they'd done things that he was disappointed with, etc. I do know the head. I've worked with him. It's a long time ago, must be 20, 25 years ago when we did some work. But I think if you look under the letter and see what really it's about, it's frustration and anger for all the work that's got in there. That's now all in pieces. But it probably says something that we ought to start thinking about. I know we have said this before, but the mental health of head teachers when something starts to go wrong. And it really struck me that I was very fortunate when I was a head. I had a governor who would read, if I was about to put a letter on, wasn't a website then, if I was about to post it out to parents, he would read it and then say, "That's a great letter, Stan, but you can't send it," and put it in the bin. And by that point, you've said what you wanted to say, and you can just pull back a little bit, and maybe that sort of person isn't there, but just about heads and what's going to tip them over the edge. And I don't think it's going to be much if we don't start sort of just stepping back a bit and say what's possible in these times. How possible is it to run your school without any interruptions? And what do you do if public health won't answer your calls?
Yeah, or you phone the DfE thinking they're the helpline today.
Well, how many days are we going to give that before they say, "Oh, we can't cope with the number of calls"?
I know, and I think the thing is, as Henry Morrison a couple of weeks ago, the sense that the DfE need to centralise everything. That for me was, don't worry, we'll sort it out now. we're in control. Well, in fact, you know, the first call that the head teacher made, I think, was there was nobody there. 8 o'clock that next day, when it was promised it was going to be up and running. It's just a reflection, I think, of this centralisation that the DfE particularly have. But I think, yeah, I mean, I was also struck by a tweet I read, quite a sad tweet of a head teacher who had his governing body meeting this week, and he felt like jacking it in, you know, because in effect the governors were very, very challenging about what had gone on. Now, I don't know the circumstances around that, but I do feel as though, you know, governors, senior leaders, you know, whatever it is in trust local authorities, you know, we all need to be very understanding, very supportive, you know, to encourage the right decision made at the right time, not to put additional pressure on so that people feel as though they, you know what it's like when you feel under pressure, sometimes you don't make the right decision. You can't see clearly. It's really sad.
I always go back, it's a very twee saying. Somebody said it to me, it's a long time ago, that said, you know, to be a critical friend, you have to be a friend first. And I think we've in some governance, we've lost the critical friend bit to be critics.
Yeah.
And at the moment, I think a lot of head teachers need to know that they've got the support of the governing body, absolutely, not just behind them, shoulder to shoulder with them, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we must all reflect on this, I think, that the key thing is trust in that relationship, isn't it? You know, and I think that I'm on a board of a Market Academy Trust. I'm the sort of chair of finance, and initially my view was, well, look, let's look ahead. You know, during this lockdown period, I was urging the school to think about, you know, how things might change and how the curriculum could be adapted for the future. But actually, I think I've quickly realised that, you know, the bandwidth of senior managers is only so wide, and it's the same with me. I'm not critical of them at all for that. And actually, you know, there is a necessity to focus in on today. You know, that actually, can we get through today? What's tomorrow going to look like? That's probably about as far forward in terms of visioning I think most head teachers are functioning at the moment. So I think there's nothing wrong in that because it's such a fluid situation. So anyway, well, what we're going to go at this week then, Stan? Where should we start?
Breaking the law in a specific way.
I mean, I think I mentioned that as the thing that last week in the video, but we didn't have time because it wasn't the right week to talk about it. But I don't know how you can actually teach British values in a classroom, or how you actually will tell people in County Durham that they need to wear their mask and they need to socially distance. And if the lockdown gets tighter, I think there is sort of, I think people will genuinely feel as though there is an inconsistency in the application of these rules. I think people feel it already. And round where I live, everybody socially, I don't see lots of people, you know, flagrantly sort of doing things against them. I just don't think people know what the rules are anymore.
I do. I mean, the idea that you'll dob in your neighbours and all that. I mean, that's so 1984 that it's incredible. I just think that's not something that the psyche of, certainly not, I would call a British psyche, isn't to do that.
No.
And I think there's also an element of, you know, the moment I point at somebody and say you're not doing what you should is the moment I put myself at significant risk.
Yes.
I don't know what happened to the marshals. Did that disappear?
Well, that seems to have disappeared, haven't they? I mean, I think this is again, this is the over messaging, isn't it? It's not even sophisticated, but it's just there are just so many initiatives, so many things are said, so many promises made.
Did you hear I don't remember using that figure of 10 million tests. You know, it's not that. I know what has been very cleverly looked at. That the statement that went out on when the press release said 10 million, but the Prime Minister just said millions. So he's now saying, I don't remember saying 10 million.
Yeah. But we've spoken before about the clarity. I mean, you referenced it before with the letter from the Pair of Governors about who, you know, the clarity of that communication strategy is probably just as important as the sort of health issues that they're trying to address. You know, that so in effect, the great thing about total lockdown, it was total. There was absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
There was no leeway. I think people quickly understood it. But here there are just so many conflicting messages around whether you should go and eat out, whether you shouldn't eat out, whether it's the young people that are doing it, whether it's not the young people that are doing this. You know, they're just, you know, get back to work. We want to see, you know, be careful when you get on the trains. Or, you know, there's just, I understand the need to get the economy back, but there's a massive risk now that actually trying to do both of these has actually compromised both of them, so that we end up with the worst of both worlds. And you know, and actually, we've got to see schools, haven't we, as a workplace? And you know, I think, you know, how pregnant women are feeling teaching in this environment.
Well, and there's going to be a shortage of teachers before long, because if you're working, you know, and some child in your bubble is off, then there's a chance that you need to isolate. It doesn't, in a primary school, it doesn't take many teachers isolating to cause crisis.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw that I was quoted in the TS this week for the Ofsted COVID-19 visits, because I've been a strong opponent of the letters that are going to be issued. Except that, you know, we do need some Ofsted inspectors out there seeing what it's like, because the process is that's how the Secretary of State gets to find out, rather than the gossip that he hears about, whereby he's suggesting that, you know, a number of teachers did step up to the mark and went well above it, but some of them didn't. Well, I don't know who they are, and where is the evidence for that? It may be true, but where have you got that evidence from? You know?
Yeah, but says the man who went on holiday in the middle, just before the exam crisis. You know, you can't
have it both ways, can you? No.
Oh.
The thing for me,
visit, what I can't understand is, from what I see that they're getting, why can't it be done by phone?
Yeah.
Why can't that be a phone conversation with the head teacher? Because technically, if they're wandering around into classes, they're a risk.
But they were saying they weren't going to do that.
But then something slightly different. I know there's a pilot for something else where they have gone and wandered around the classes.
Yeah.
And you know, even another adult in school that's not necessary is a risk. I'm sure most risk statements now are trying to avoid adults coming into school unless there's a proper purpose for it.
And of course the issue is, you know, let's the worst thing again, it's just anticipating what the problem is. You know, actually school A with I don't know how many kids in it, an Ofsted inspector walks in COVID, right? Then speaks to the entire senior leadership team about how they're doing. With them, all of the senior leadership team have to self-isolate. I wonder how that school is going to function.
Yeah.
But actually, for me, I'm thinking, you know, you're right. You know, why are we increasing the risk when we can do that job without a visit?
Yeah. Well, my thoughts on it was, you know, where's the framework to start with? What? So we know what's being asked and why it's being asked. Until they've got a number of schools, how do they know to compare how well one is doing against another? So there can't be letters for the first schools because there's nothing to compare it with.
Actually, yesterday the TS ran an article saying that senior HMI has broken ranks and has spoken to them and said that quite a few inspectors aren't happy doing the visits, and some are. So you imagine you and me, I'm really happy to do them, Stan. You're not. You've got a lot of sympathy for the school, thinking, well, I shouldn't really be here. Whereas I'm thinking, oh, we're up for this. Yeah, come on. We're going to write very different letters.
Yeah.
Or even if we don't write different letters, we're going to be the thought process in our brain.
The evidence we supply
will be very different. The questions you ask to the questions I ask are very different. And even if we asked exactly, we were told these are the questions, you're going to say those words in a slightly different way.
Yeah, of course you are.
Yeah. So I think that
So do it by phone. Do a number, maybe 30, 40 schools before any letter goes out or there's any report, and then start sharing ideas instead of let's see who's doing it well, who's doing it not. Let's use the letter to say these schools were doing this well, but generally, not individually identifying schools.
Well, I'm waiting for the letter that goes out to say the school were unable to cope well with the most recent outbreak of COVID because the senior leadership team were wiped out by the HMI who you know, and actually there may be some value in it if those letters say, and this is why it's so important to do surveys rather than do individual letters. If you're the HMI stand, you don't want to be there. You've got a lot of sympathy for that school. You know the test and tracing has been a disaster. You're doing it in Bolton. Parents have heard about your visit and they've emailed you. They've harangued the head. I want to know. I've been queuing up in a car park for 20 hours or something to get a test. Still can't get it. You have to make a judgment as to what you put in that letter. Why has it been difficult for that school to cope? So are you going to write that?
Well,
it's going to publish that.
Oh, you and I both know that there's a reading process and an editing process that would make sure anything I wrote would never get to press.
But that is actually warping the evidence, isn't it? That is actually amending the evidence, because you know I may quality assure that, but I was not there. You know, the sense of disappointment and anger amongst that school community. If you're going to do it, you know, you've got to do it. And that means that, you know, without fear or favour means you report on what you find. Actually, as you say, I'm not entirely confident that would actually happen. But the risk of Ofsted is they just went down the survey route. All of that could be wrapped up, couldn't it? Yeah. All of it a more sort of balanced.
Yeah, and you could ask the question, you know, simple questions like, what's been the most frustrating part? When is, you know, what things have challenged you most in getting children back in? Because again, feedback from heads is children have been fantastic.
Yeah,
children have come in, they've done what they've been expected. Behaviour's been excellent, and it's other adults, often parents. A local school to me has now had to insist parents wear face masks in the playground if they come through the school gate, because they're still congregating.
Yeah.
You know, despite being asked several times not to do so, they still do.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that the Secretary of State's comments were really unwelcome this week at the committee about, you know, the efforts that staff and schools have made. I thought.
Don't you think that's signalling to his bosses?
Well,
I'm.
Yeah. And also, I think that, you know, I've suggested on Twitter this morning, is that the reason why Ofsted have to write a letter to schools? You know, because they've been instructed that they've got to do that. And actually, if that is the case, and I'm not chief inspector, but actually I would encourage the inspectors, if forced to do that, just write what you find, you know, whether good or bad, in terms of what national policy is on testing and tracing. You know, we need to know, and I think actually that would be a very helpful solution to the evaluation of how well the country's cope with this.
Did Ian Ashworth call it "trace the test" now? Not test and trace.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, as we come to a close here now, I mean, it's frightening to think what might happen in the next week.
Yeah.
We've always looked back. We've never really looked forward in these chats.
No, it's not going to reduce at the moment, is it? The number of students and pupils out of school is not going to reduce. It's going to increase until we've got some kind of test that can give you almost 12 hours at minimum, shorter time than that. I know in Salford they are testing a saliva test, because
Yes.
my daughter's involved in something where that's being piloted or tested. Something that can give you a very, very quick result is what we need to keep children in school. So we can say, well, we'll test you now, and the most you have to be away from school is half a day while we test. Because without that, and I understand, schools have managed really well at not necessarily sending the whole bubble home at times, or the whole year group, but it becomes impossible when you've got 2 or 3 children who have symptoms or who've been tested and found positive, to track all their contacts in the last 48 hours and then say, well, all those, you're virtually at bubble level already.
Yeah.
The management of that must be really stressful.
Anyway, I mean,
no parent's going to thank you, are they, for sending their child home?
No. I think the thing is that we must bear in mind. I watched an item on BBC yesterday that Marseille, France are having similar problems with their testing arrangements. This isn't just a British problem. But actually, there is a sense that I did expect it to be better. Is probably one.
Well, yeah, and the idea that nobody anticipated the demand would rise. You're telling me that they've got things like the nudge unit, they've got behavioural scientists, they go ahead with a thing that says test. If you're not sure, get a test, and then they find it unusual or strange that there's a massive upsurge in people wanting a test.
They did say, didn't they, that they were advised by Sage that they, about what the likely increase was going to be, and that this exceeded that. Actually, whether or not Sage is the right group, I don't know, but anybody who runs a school will know how some parents are going to respond. They're not going to listen to the fact that you should only go to a test if your child has got those symptoms. They're going to say, but they're in a year group and there's a child who's possibly tested COVID. Yeah,
I've been sent home because my friend's been tested positive, and I've got to wait. Hang on, we've got mum, dad, grandma, granddad, great auntie. Yeah. We need you tested to make sure we're not any illogical steps in that.
Yeah, but I think the thing is that I'm not a scientist, but I could have predicted. I think I probably had predicted more accurately than the government about the increase in the demand for testing when schools went back. I think, and to give 10 tests summed it up for me. To give 10 tests to a secondary school, that says it really for me. And actually, what they're doing now is they're basing that, aren't they, on the how many thousand students you've got? Because there's a grave shortage here. They can't give loads out. So I think that's it. I was suspicious when they gave just 10 tests.
Yeah. Because I remember I had with 1,500 saying, that's really, you'd be better off giving it to a care home than really not going to help us. And there's the timing as well. And I know it was said yesterday that they deliberately extended the time from 24 hours to allow more to be done. But, if you've gone for a test because you've got symptoms, I had to do it with my mother. 24 hours is a long time to wait for a result that could be, my mother's nearly 90. It's a very serious thing. And to be told you'll get it, within a few hours, and then it be more than 24 hours, is really, really ramps the stress up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've been talking, I think, getting on for 30 minutes there, Stan. Just so that people watching are aware of the sorts of analysis we do following this. We do check how many people are watching. We don't know who it is and how long they watch for. We're delighted that so many of you find these enjoyable. We are conscious, though, that we want to make sure we get a broad range of voices and guests. So in the next few weeks, we've invited Jenny Webb back, who was very popular. She's going to talk about female leadership. And also we've invited Rakshant Patney from Ambition Institute to talk about leadership programs as well. So we are conscious of the fact, I think over the last few weeks, a number of male voices, and we want to hear more of the female voices. So we are broadening the range of guests that we have. And if you're watching and you would like to join us, don't hesitate to contact us. We've got other guests lined up as well, but actually I'm sure we could fit you in, and you don't have to be the leader of something. This is just we're interested in your voice, your view. So if you would like to join us, just drop us an email or comment on the YouTube page, and we'll pick that up and contact you. Anyway, I look forward to seeing you next Friday, Stan.
Yeah. Is it Friday next week again?
It is, and who knows where we're going to be then. But anyway, cheerio everybody, and have a safe week.
Cheers, Frank.